Good day, everybody, as we're allowing everyone to come in here. We're just going to be getting ready in just a moment. Philip is putting the final touches on his whiteboard.
Oh yeah, it's now clean.
All right, so I think we've got most people who have said yes to the session. And so first off, it's great to have all of you back for day 2. We're really excited to have all of you here today to do our next session, which is all around OKRs. And so with that said, we are going to be recording this session. So if you or someone else, perhaps misses something, or there's something you want to share with one of your friends, definitely feel free to, or we'll be making available for you to kind of view at your own pleasure. Also, if you can just mute yourself as we go through the presentation, we'll definitely be leaving some time for Q&A, so don't worry. If you do have any questions, once again, either feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and we can take an opportunity to address them. With all of that said, I'd now like to take the chance to reintroduce all of you to Philip Gales. Philip is not only one of your peers within the cohort of this incubator program, he also was one of our entrepreneurs in residence at the DMZ. He was an EIR for us for just around 2 years, I want to say, Philip, give or take.
So plus or minus, yeah.
Mostly working with companies in our accelerator program as they were really looking to scale. But as Philip mentioned probably to most of you yesterday, through a lot of his time being an EIR, through the various amounts of notebooks that he has behind him, he really started to see some kind of common threads, problems, and things that came up that made him not want to just help advise startups, but actually take some action to help companies out as they're beginning to, build towards their vision. And so with that said, I'd now like to pass the floor over to Philip to do perhaps another introduction of himself and walk us through this OKR demo. So Philip, over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shane. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Pleasure to see you all again, both from yesterday and see a few faces from the last OKRs presentation. Just to start off with, this is a very, very different discussion than the last objectives, key results, and North Star metrics. The last time we spoke, if any of you were with the bootcamp session, it was very much tailored to a much smaller company, a small group of individuals, co-founders, etc. What I'm going to do is extend upon that to talk again about OKRs and why we're using them, but to really talk about what I've experienced as companies scale. To reference what Shane keeps saying, and I do keep showing off about this, I've worked with a shit ton of companies. There's going to be a lot of the use of the word shit today, so I apologize in advance. And I found that they all tend to go through the same troubling period, which we'll call the shit show period. And we will talk about why and how and when that happens. And then we'll pull that back to why objectives and key results are so important in terms of focusing your company, aligning everyone within it, holding people accountable to the key results, and making sure that you're heading in the right direction. So that is to say, this is an extension that is more relevant to you as you start to scale and grow your companies of that initial OKRs presentation. So last time I did this, it didn't work so well. So I'll just do a very, very quick intro in a moment, and then we'll go back to what we discussed last time, which really is execution is everything. But particularly as you start to scale, you will hit the shit show period. I've seen it repeatedly in startups, so we'll talk about what that is. And we'll talk about why the things that you're doing at this stage can often be exactly what you should not do as you scale your company. And then we'll talk about what you do need to be doing to scale and align your company, and that'll lead us into management through objectives. So we'll start to talk a little bit about how giving clear objectives to your company, to employees, to groups, to teams, etc., helps empower them. And then we'll show how those objectives over time has evolved into OKRs. And we'll talk about what OKRs are again. We'll have a little quick breakout session on OKRs, and we'll have a quick intro to the OKRs product that we're using in 8.ai. And then at the end, there will be time for questions. Just to reiterate, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat or save it to the end. If something happens, like you can't hear me, I use an acronym that you don't understand, there's a major component or something that you think that doesn't make sense, please just put your hand up or jump in or interject. But generally, questions to the end. Top and the bottom of this, I'm a serial tech entrepreneur. I've spent a lot of time working with startups, and I found that the biggest challenge for them is focusing, understanding what they need to focus on, and executing upon that. And that's why I'm here talking about OKRs. As Kate was pinging me yesterday, I have a beautiful young daughter. That's her from about a year and a bit ago when she was coding. And this is a more recent photo. We had a renovation done to our bathroom. Daddy saw this big box of the bath had come in and thought, you know what? That is a completely free playhouse for her. And she is delighted. We've got little LED strip lights on the top of it that she can turn on and off. She's drawing in there. She loves it. She's got a little playhouse. That is to say that if my daughter interrupts, as she frequently does, I apologize in advance. She often wants to see who Daddy is talking to and wave to them. So she may be coming in during the presentation. Let's get to the meat of it. Execution is everything with startups. I'm sure I don't need to reiterate this, but to quote two quotes from Sam Altman, ideas are not worth anything. It is only executing well that creates value. But the problem is that execution is really two separate steps, figuring out what to do and actually getting it done. And the problem for startups is that they can often fall on the two of those, figuring out exactly what they need to be doing. There's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of things that will distract you, but there's also the problem of actually getting it done, making sure that you are focused on what needs to happen, you're not getting distracted by shiny objects, or ensuring that your team is doing what you need them to do, or actually just holding people accountable. Employees can get carried away with new projects and new ideas, and often they'll be saying, well, I've got this great opportunity. They go and head off and try and deal with it or sort it out or take that opportunity, but then they miss the bread and butter of what needs to happen, actually closing a sale or building a product or pushing the feature. And so the top and the bottom of this is you need to execute, you need to figure out what you're executing on, and you need to get that done. And OKRs will help you with that. There are many, many distractions. We joked a lot about this last time. There are entrepreneurs who want to live the lifestyle, but they never actually execute anything. There's lots of groups that you could go to. There's lots of meetups. There's lots of ways of feeling as if you're actually making progress without doing anything. There's superficial copying. Every successful tech company has a cool office with a nice logo, with a brand, with a football table. So should you put time and effort into those? No, that doesn't build a startup. There's drivers towards perfectionism, making sure your code is perfect before you ship it. But that just stops you getting your code in the hands of your users. There's serial fundraisers. I've seen this. I've seen people that are extremely good at raising money from VCs and tell a very compelling story, but actually have nothing behind it. So this is to say, you need to stay focused on what really makes a difference, which is executing upon your product and building something that people like. And that's one thing that OKRs will help with. But the second problem, as you start to scale, is what we're going to call the shit show period. And I'm actually going to jump out of sharing because I have my wonderful little whiteboard. So let us stop sharing here. It is my experience, both from my own companies, from companies I've worked with, from companies that I have mentored, and from companies I've helped at the DMZ, that most grow in, let's make this revenue. This could be revenue, this could be size, this could be number of users, doesn't particularly matter. This is time. Most grow on a trajectory that kind of looks a bit like this. They've got an idea, they start to get a bit of traction, they scale with some traction, they hopefully grow exponentially, and hopefully at this point in time, they IPO. The company during this period is typically a small coordinated group of founders and early employees. There are some ups and downs, there are some releases that don't go so well, there are some pivots, etc. And then eventually they find some traction, they start to grow, and eventually at some point in time, they turn into this sort of growth stage startup. But there is this horrible period in the middle that typically lasts for 6 to 18 months that frankly I call the shit show period. This happens to coincide typically with the old DMZ accelerator. That's how I ended up talking to a lot of startups about it. Typically it's when you're sort of 10 to 20 employees. Typically, it's around your sort of pre-seed, seed, maybe Series A. And I see it as a feature of what happens when you start to grow and scale your company. And you say, well, this sounds like it has very little to do with OKRs. Well, okay, cool. Let's get on to that. So let's talk about what those companies look like. Typically, your early stage company looks like a couple of founders. Maybe let's make it a couple of founders and early employees in a nice tight group like this. And maybe you've got a couple of outsourced contract devs, or maybe you've got a couple of salespeople reporting to somebody. But you've got this super small, tight, coordinated group. Discussions within this group are really easy. It's this person talking to this person, or it's this person going and chatting over here. Information flows very easily. Communication is simple. Decision-making is very, very easy. And because you coordinate and you can see what everyone's doing and understand what is happening, it's very easy to make a decision and understand, well, if I make this product decision, it will impact sales in this way, and it will impact devs in this other way, and I can understand what's going on. So these early stage companies are typically tight, coordinated, with high level of communication. At scale, at the other end of the spectrum, sort of growth, etc., startups, typically, and I won't get into the full management theory of this, the alternatives, etc., but they typically have something that looks a little bit like sort of pyramid hierarchy. Typically, you have a CEO, you have maybe a VP of engineering or a CTO, maybe you have a head of sales, maybe you have a VP product, etc. And underneath each of these, you maybe have a manager leading a team of devs, for example. Or you have a head of sales leading a sales manager who has some salespeople reporting to them. And so you get these sort of relatively complex pyramid type hierarchies. Now, the problem with this is that all the things that worked well at this early stage, that you got used to over years of doing it, years of hackiness, years as a founder, are actually the things that work really badly at this stage. So for example, a problem comes up, or just even the CEO has an idea. CEO has an idea, goes to one of the devs, says, hey, we should build this thing. Dev goes, oh, well, that will take some time. Okay, I'll fit that into my planning. At some point in time, the CTO hears about it, like, okay, that makes sense, and a few things move around. Cool, that's okay. That's how you move quickly, that's how you come up with an idea, that's how you iterate. At this stage, if the CEO goes to one of the devs and says, hey, we should do this, that is a major problem because it cuts out all the intermediate managers. It causes friction between the devs because suddenly one of them is being called out for special treatment and the others aren't. It cuts out and alienates the managers. It means that the managers are no longer the people you go to for resources, you have to go to the CEO. It means that decision-making gets bottlenecked by the CEO. Another example, if these two individuals clash, they say, hey, we should do this thing. No, we should do that thing. No, we're going to argue about it. What happens? Well, they probably go and talk to somebody. Maybe the CEO comes in, they have a discussion. Cool. They figure out what needs to happen. Super tight, super small, just ping the person Slack, jump on a phone call, super easy, make the decision. If this dev and this salesperson clash on something, if you try and act in the same way, and for example, the CEO comes in and tries to resolve this, again, it causes a major problem. It causes a major problem because it ends up relying upon the CEO to solve all the issues and challenges. It also cuts out all these intermediate managers that might need to be involved. It also means that there's no discussion with anyone else. It also means that everyone is suddenly dependent upon you or the CTO or whoever's jumping in to make all the decisions. There's no autonomy. And so the point I'm trying to make is that the things that you are doing today that will make you successful, that you need to keep doing, right? Small discussions, tight group, coordinated, high level of communications, can actually turn into exactly the things that will really fuck over your corporate culture at a large scale. Because you need to start at some point in time, depending upon your intermediates, your managers, empowering them to make decisions, ensuring that different levels are interacting and managing and leading, ensuring that people are treated equally and with the right respect and deference, but also ensuring that you're not the sole decision maker, right? So let's talk about this. For example, if you have a product person, let's draw some more people in here, you might have a product person, a dev, and a salesperson all arguing. The dev is saying, I have a lot of technical debt. I need to spend my time improving the back end to make sure it's scalable. The salesperson says, well, that's great, but I've got a customer who really wants this feature. You should sell this, or you should build this feature so I can sell it. Otherwise, I can't close this deal. Sales is really important. I get that you need to reduce your technical debt, but sales drives us. And the product person might be saying, well, that's great, but I've got to build towards this longer term product vision, right? So I don't want you to solve the bugs. I don't want you to deal with your technical debt. I need you to build the framework for this product or this feature, which will be released in 6 months' time. This is a clash. You can't resolve this. There's got to be a decision made. Rely upon the CEO every single time to come in and deal with this, then you will bottleneck yourself and you'll be dragged into every problem. The ideal way of dealing with this is if each of these individuals knows where and what direction the company is going in and why, and can decide this themselves. This is about empowering your employees so that you can move faster and clearly in the right direction. What you really want is everyone to be pointing in plus or minus the right direction. And the best way of doing this is to be very explicit and clear at the top level which direction your company is going in. So if you say we are going in this direction, and you make it clear and you communicate it and you ensure that people understand it, then your individual employees can resolve many of these issues and challenges and conflicts themselves. Example, if you tell your company that you need to fundraise in 6 months' time, so you need 3 months of really stellar growth, which means that you need to be pushing revenue, then that will deprioritize the product person saying, hey, we need to build this feature for 6 months' time, because that won't help with that objective of growing revenue to fundraise. It also means that the dev will say, well, hey, I've got this back-end technical debt, but if that doesn't lead to immediate revenues, that should be deprioritized. If a salesperson is saying, I can close this contract with this feature, and the feature can be built within a few weeks, then that should be the priority. Conversely, if you're saying, well, we need to head in the direction of greater robustness, or we need to launch these features, then that should be helping this decision making. And that is exactly where OKRs come in. There are two big reasons that we are pushing OKRs so much. Number one is that in the early days, execution is everything, and that involves you focusing on exactly what needs to be done and getting it done. And number two is, as your company scales and grows, that continues to be the case, but alignment on a singular direction becomes increasingly important. And again, that's where OKRs will come in. This is why we're pushing so much with top-level OKRs. And in a bit, we can talk about, well, top-level OKRs are great. How do we then cascade them to each of these individual levels, and how do we cascade them further down? That's where cascaded OKRs comes in, and we can talk about that one. But the key thing here is you can use OKRs as the main means to orient and align your company and guide the direction they're going in. I'm going to pause there for a moment. Does that make sense? And are there any questions on that? Cool. So I'm going to jump back into the presentation. You will get a copy of this presentation. It doesn't have my beautiful little scribbly drawings, but it does have a quick walkthrough of, you go through a shit show period. The problem is the difference between the early and the growth stage startups. It's the structure of them, it's the decision-making processes, it's the ways in which what you're doing now is fundamentally at conflict with what you'll need to do in the future. And simplistic as it may sound, aligning your company in a singular direction by stating clearly your OKRs and communicating them is one of the very best ways of overcoming that. So, on that note, let's talk about objectives and key results. So the main thing that we're trying to do here is to focus you and your company on what needs to be done, avoid distractions from external things, communicate that with intentionality internally, and then hold people accountable. And OKRs are an evolution of a number of different management methods that started in the 50s. So 1954, Peter Drucker published Management by Objectives. What he noticed was that people are significantly better at executing if they understand what they're doing. This was mind-blowing. The concept of saying, hey, we need to get this thing done, go away and do it, or let's align, or this is what we're trying to do, was a major change in management theory. So when Drucker published Management by Objectives, the whole concept was if you explain where you're going to individuals, they can help guide the company there. The problem with objectives is that you can't hold people accountable to them. They tend to be, let's grow, or we need to push this product in order to get into the hands of customers, or we need to get customer feedback, we need to reduce our bug rate, etc. But you can't hold people accountable to them, and you can't understand if you've actually met that objective. And so slowly over time, management by objectives morphed into goals, particularly SMART goals. And it started to say, well, just saying we need to grow revenue is insufficient. I can't hold anyone accountable to that. So I need to put a number in there. I need to make it specific and I need to make it measurable. So I need to say, well, I need to grow my revenue to $5,000 in monthly recurring revenue. But that's great. But what if I don't do that this month? What if I don't do that this quarter, this year, etc.? Well, I can't hold anyone accountable. So it has to be time bound. If it's time bound, then am I coming up with something crazy? Do I want to treble our revenue over the next month? That's stupid. That's demoralizing if you set that as a goal. So that leads into setting goals that are achievable and realistic and are agreed with people. And so what evolved is this SMART goal: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. But the problem with that is they're really, really fucking boring. Because the SMART goal is something like increase monthly recurring revenue to $5,000 by the end of Q2 2021. That's a great SMART goal. But that doesn't get people excited. It doesn't give people the freedom to do things. It's just boring and specific. And so the next evolution that came along, particularly around the growth of Google, and Google uses OKRs a lot, is OKRs. Taking this objective and this management by objectives and taking these SMART goals and combining them into one thing that is both an exciting, clear, but long-term vision and objective with a means to hold people accountable and to measure if you've actually hit that objective. So OKRs simply are objectives, something that gets people up in the morning, gets them excited, a rallying cry, and key results, something that keeps people accountable, a very specific measure that allows you to understand if the objective has been achieved. And that's what we're talking about here. So an objective is where you need to go to. It's ideally exciting, it's ideally inspiring, it ideally gets people up and motivated. And in my experience, it's best if there are around 2 to 4 per company at any one time. For your stage, and there's an asterisk on this, I recommend you're looking at objectives over the next 4 to 12 weeks. That's quite a short time period, and the reason for that is, although you are maturing, the speed with which you are understanding your customer still needs to be very fast. The speed with which you're iterating your product or changing your sales cycle needs to be fast. And so we're talking about a 4 to 12 week time horizon for these, because your objective needs to change with the needs of your business and what you're learning. But these should be that rallying cry, like grow revenue in this area, or launch this great product, or finesse this, or understand what our users really need. Now, attached to that needs to be a means to understand if you've hit that objective. And so ideally, you have between 1 and 3 objectives that are smart. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, agreed, realistic, and time-bound. So if you say, I want to grow my revenue, or I've got to grow, I've got to scale this, you need objectives around things like increase my monthly recurring revenue to $5,000 by the end of Q2. Increase my conversion rate through my sales funnel from stage A to stage B to 56% by the end of March. Get feedback from 20 customers using a customer survey by the end of April 2021. They're a bit boring, but you can tell if you've done them, and that allows you to understand if you've hit your objective. Just before I move on, and I know I said leave your questions to the end, but are there any questions or comments around that pairing of objectives and key results, and particularly the difference in usage and the difference in nomenclature in them?
No, but sorry. Hi.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Just to go back to the shit show discussion for a bit. How does the company know, I'm not sure if I missed this, but how does the company know it's approaching that shit show period, or is actually in the shit show period?
Let's leave that until questions at the end. That's a brilliant question. You will know, because your employees will be arguing with each other. You'll be trying to get something done and something else completely different happens. Your employees will be dissatisfied. There will be friction. People will leave. People will be grumpy. You will be frustrated. There's a whole host of those, and we'll talk much more about it. And I've seen it repeatedly. I notice Shane is nodding his head. It happens all the time. But let's leave that to the end. We'll focus on OKRs now for the moment, and I'll talk more about it. Wonderful, thank you, Shane. My apologies for that music. That wasn't that wasn't my intention. Never mind. Random choice of person or random choice of company. I'm sorry to say I've been mocking or playing with all of you. I intend to lead from the front with this one, and I'm going to share my OKRs with you. And I'm going to do that for 2 reasons. Number 1 is I like to lead from the front and set an example. And number 2 is I am going to share them in Innate itself. I'm looking for your critique. Actually, reason number 3, I'm about to meet with Shane and Vartika to discuss my OKRs, and I've been lazy and I've not updated them, so I thought I'd just double up with the 2 of them. So what we're going to start with. Innate is a networked OKRs tool. It helps accelerators and startups coordinate and discuss what exactly is going on with the company. And it's really, really useful to startups because it will help you execute, it will help you focus on what needs to be done, and it's really useful for incubators and accelerators because it allows them to see what the companies are doing, understand what their needs are, and then connect them with the right EIRs or the right funding sources or help or particular people. That's why it's valuable to have it networked. What you're seeing here is, first of all, my OKRs, and secondly, what Shane and Vartika will see. We have all the different programs across the top here. You will not, as startups, be able to access this, but this is what a program lead can see. And here is a table which will eventually be filled out with all the companies in this cohort with all your OKRs. It's a super quick and simple way for Shane and Vartika to see what's going on, see how we're progressing or not, and to see exactly what our targets and actuals are. Now, you will notice that I have some OKRs in here, and there are some intentional mistakes in them. It wasn't me being lazy, there's some intentional mistakes in them. And so what we're going to do is to go into what the startup would see. Now, I'm going to click on here. This is exactly what Shane and Vartika can do. But you as startups will be invited to a dashboard that looks a little bit like this. You'll probably just have OKRs and settings, and you'll be able to go into OKRs, and you will see your OKRs. So these are my literal OKRs. You'll notice I have here 3 objectives. I then have a number of key results. I've got 1 for this objective, I've got 3 here for this objective, and I've got 2 here for this objective. You'll notice that they should all have this quality of specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And then because they are measurable, they also actually have a measure, both as a target and an actual next to them. Let's go and talk about that one. So my first objective is I need to roll out Innate.ai Lite, the OKRs tool. My key result is to have 5 incubators using Innate.ai Lite by the 31st of March, 2021. I can tell you at this point in time that I have 3 incubators using it. So at the start of the year, I had no one. This red line is my target. By the 31st of March, I entered a target of 5. And at this point in time, I have 3. Now, what's the date today? It's the 16th of March. I can update this progress. I can put in a target, or I can put in an actual. I'm going to put in an actual. Today, I have, this isn't going to be massively useful, but I have 3 incubators using Innate. Do I should confirm, or do I should submit that? Yes, I do. And this will update and continue to track. This is how the system and program leads can see how you're progressing against your key result. It is measurable, there's a metric, it's time-bound, there's a date, and we can see how it's burning along. This feature isn't that good yet, but this is a little measure of how ambitious I am, what my actual velocity and my execution is. And you can see my ambition is pretty good. I'm setting something in the right period of time. My velocity, I'm making good progress on it, but I'm a little bit less effective than I would hope for. And here are all the initiatives, the actual steps that I'm going through to execute on this key result. So I want to roll out Innate.ai Lite to the DMZ satellite orgs. I want to onboard these various incubators, and I want to close a deal with Elevate's Accelerator. First of all, I've misspelled Elevate's Accelerator. This is actually e-commerce North. So I can go in and I can actually say, boom. I can edit it and I can put that in.
Philip, do you mind if I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
For those 3, I don't know what you want to call them, where the green, and yellow. Yeah. So I understand the bottom one with your performance. The top 2, how are those, like, yeah. How did you get that?
Yeah. So what I'm doing basically is based upon the stage of company, the idea is that you need to be able to execute this thing in the next 4 to 12 weeks. So it actually really comes down to, is it more than 12 weeks away or not?
Okay.
And then the velocity is, are you actually making reasonable progress on that? To be honest with you, it's a bit of a test feature. I'm not sure if it's that good. Give me feedback on this. And that's just the open request here. Give me feedback, like what do you like, what do you not like? That was just a test to see if we could actually understand some of this data better. A more exciting it is going to come out is I'm working on, I've got an NLP toolkit, natural language processing toolkit that I'm training to help you say if this is an objective or not, and if this is a key result. So it will actually start to guide you through, hey, you know what? That key result's kind of vague and it doesn't have a time-bound component. It's really not a good key result. Have you considered these parts? But yeah, there's various things in here that are being played around with. So first of all, as you log in, if you're using it for the first time, it will put you through an interactive training. I'm just going to click on this. If you want to redo the training, if you want to brush up, it will guide you through it and it will step you through actually creating an OKR. So I'm just going to very, very quickly do that. We'll click into an OKR. There's a little bit of an overview as to what an OKR looks like, and we can start creating OKRs. So my objective, let's get everyone excited about OKRs. Okay, and we'll create that. This is a bit of background on key results. Again, make them specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. So what's my key result going to be? Well, how do I measure if you lot are excited about objectives and key results? What if we did number of surveys with greater than 7 out of 10 satisfaction. Rating. So, sorry, I'm having to close this. My metric in units is number of surveys. Now, is that a good key result? No, I've got some people shaking their heads. Why is that not a good key result? It's specific, right? Well, it's kind of not. It's kind of not. Like, it's not specific. What I actually need is something like 20 surveys. It's not time-bound. By end of March 2021, is it agreed? Well, I'm agreeing with myself. Yeah, I'll do that. Is it realistic? I don't know. But yeah, it meets all the criteria of a SMART goal. So we go create. Now, today, which is the 16th, I have done no surveys. Next on that. I said by the end of March, I would do 20 surveys. So this is how it gets my current and my target. I'm going to go submit on this one. I'm just going to close this for the moment. Now what you can see is it's an OKR with an actual and a target metric. And I can start putting in all the things I'll do. So create a survey for follow-up. Sorry, it doesn't stay in the right place. Send out the survey. Compile results. So here is my objective, my key result, some metrics measuring it. As I go along, say I get one back tomorrow, I can update this with where I am. And to go back to this, if I now refresh the view that the DMZ program leads have, they will now see a new objective, a new key result, new metrics, and new progress on that. And they can jump in and say, oh, you know, in terms of product feedback, whoa. Sorry, everyone, that was not my intention. Shane, did you just do something? Sorry, that was everyone's OKRs. In terms of product feedback, Shane or Vartika can now say, oh, Philip is talking about product feedback. We should connect him with Mike Ho around product. We should connect him with somebody around data, etc. So that's how they can help. And now, as I say, don't hold these things on a pedestal. If they change, edit them. If you complete them, click completed. Only use delete if it really needs to be scrapped. I can now say, you know what, that's completed, done, I don't care about it anymore. And it goes down here as a completed OKR. Or if you really want to, you can delete them. Now that OKR is gone. Now, if I want to share this, apologies, I'm just going to do something quickly. I can go home and I can go into my settings and I can say, first of all, you know, who can see this? How can they access it? I've actually sent an invite to Philip Next Canada. I don't want him seeing this anymore, so I'm going to remove his access to that. I can see that DMZ has access to this one. I'm going to edit their access because I'm happy with them seeing my OKRs. Diligence report, periodic report, dashboard, I'll turn those off. We can talk about those in the future. And I've got my example company here. Now, if I happen to be in another program, I can also share with that program. So for example, if I happen to be in Y-Space, if I'm in Techstars, if I'm in Ryerson Venture Zone, I can also share with those companies. And if, for example, I have a co-founder, I can invite them. It'd be helpful if I could spell by clicking here and selecting or deselecting what I'm giving them access to. And they will get an onboarding email to collaborate and share around this. I'm going to stop talking about this at this point. You'll notice I haven't filled in all the core stuff here, but you will be getting an invite, or you'll either have received an invite or you'll be getting one soon. It will walk you through the process of entering the description of your business, doing some basic OKRs training, and starting to enter your OKRs, and they will be shared with the DMZ team. You will have the opportunity to share them with your team internally, with any investors you may have, with any programs or others that you might be working with. But just to be really, really clear, you have absolute control via these two areas over who can see what in this system. I highly recommend you don't do this, but if you get really annoyed with DMZ, you can just remove their access and it will remove you from their OKR system. Now, that means Shane and Vartika can't help you, can't see you. They can't do anything to assist you. Maybe you hate your co-founder, you decide, you know what, I'm gonna remove you from this. You have those controls. Everything is under your control, but it is shared with the program leads so that they can help you. Please give me feedback on this one. If you encounter any issues, please tell me. The only final thing is, whatever email that you receive an invite via is the email that you must use to sign in and register. For security reasons, you cannot use a different email because then you'll be able to access, or somebody else might be able to access your confidential information by pretending to be you. So it is highly tied to the exact email that your invitation is sent to, or that you enter in here. I'll leave you with that. Please ping me on Slack, etc. if you have any more questions or queries. So we're going to jump back into this. Again, just to recap what we discussed, this system is to help you craft, track, and share your OKRs, to train you, to help DMZ monitor you and help you, and you have absolute control over what data is shared and with whom. You'll be able to build an OKR setup like this, and each week you'll be prompted to update your most recent metrics via a little email going out, which will request a weekly update. Depending upon what DMZ has set up, you may also be requested to enter some investor metrics and potentially just some qualitative reporting, like what help you need and do you have any comments, like, hey, I'm really struggling with sales and good week so far, but getting a bit stressed. You can put that sort of thing in. And again, if you have any questions, queries, feedback, please tell me. I'm going to jump out of this. I'm going to stop screen sharing and let's dive into some questions.